Welcome to Deep Transformation, Self Society Spirit. I'm Roger Walsh, and our co-host is John Dupuy. And with us today are two people from what is really one of the most remarkable organizations I know. That organization goes by the acronym GRIP, which stands for Guiding Rage into Power. And from one sense, I guess in the common terminology, it would be called a prison rehabilitation program, but that's a bit like saying that the Marines are fitness training. GRIP takes people and offers them, the prisoners, the opportunity of going through a year-long intensive training. Rehabilitation isn't the right word. This is more like bodhisattva training. It is training to do a radical personal transformation with the long-term, lifelong goal of becoming a peacemaker, an activist, a contributor. And it is a deeply moving process. I had the privilege of going to one of the graduations and hearing the men. At that time it was all men. Now GRIP operates in both men's and women's prisons. But hearing these men's stories of their lives, what they'd been through, the trauma they'd suffered, and the way they had dedicated themselves to healing, to rehabilitating themselves, to becoming who they truly were and could be, and dedicating their lives to service. And in that day, I literally cried more in one day than I had in 10 years. It just blew me out of the water. So I've become a huge fan of GRIP and the work it's doing, the lives it's changing, and the way in which it's touching society. The two people with us today are Fateen Jackson and Kim Moore. Fateen describes himself as a spoken word artist, and he went through the GRIP program in San Quentin prison in 2013. And then after he graduated, he went on to become a trainer facilitator himself. He was released from prison in 2019, but continues to work with GRIP to facilitate groups, to train, and to serve that community. Kim Gross-Moore has had many lives. Kim has been an organizational consultant, trainer, CEO, leader, organizer, with organizations running from affordable housing to healthcare to immigration to violence prevention and criminal justice reform. And now she's the CEO of GRIP. And Kim also was trained in social anthropology and was a Rhodes Scholar, no less, at Oxford University. So Kim, let's start with you. You know, you have worked in so many incredible service roles, done so much good. What made you choose to dedicate your life to GRIP and this program?
Yeah, thank you. That's a sweet question, and it's nice to be here. I appreciate getting to be in conversation with you, Roger and John, and happy to have my colleague Fateen here with me for this. I think I kind of want to start, maybe like where do we come from, my people and how that guided me to where I am today. And so, starting with my mother's family were Russian Polish Jews who fled pogroms in Russia at, the turn of the 20th century, and then throughout Eastern Europe, finally fleeing the Holocaust to arrive in the United States in 1939. And they quickly assimilated into an American white intellectual culture and class, and had a lot of external successes, but they also had a lot of unprocessed trauma and guilt that was passed down the generations. And then my father's side can trace their roots back to Elder Brewster from the Mayflower. So I inherited the blood of both victims and survivors of genocide and also perpetrators of genocide and intolerance, back in colonial days and the early centuries of our United States. And so I think a big part of what my life purpose has been about is transforming or transmuting both the trauma and the responsibility of those inherited elements. So yes, I've worked in a lot of different ways and places, but the thread running through it all is transformation, is human evolution, is healing from the traumas that we inherit and we experience in our lives, and then creating that beloved community and that possibility of peace, not in a glib Pollyanna way, but in a profound, honest, accountable way. I think I want to say maybe one more thing about just my own history, and this is somewhat dry. So I served as a community organizer for many years, which is how I got into working on affordable housing and immigration reform and healthcare and all of that as a grassroots faith-based community organizer. And we began to work on criminal justice reform. And I realized that there was a piece that was sort of out of integrity for me, that most of the work I had been doing, I was in relationship with, and I had direct or family experience of the pain and the issues. And with criminal justice reform, I realized that because of my background and the privilege that I had, the system is set up to protect people like me from actually knowing and being in direct relationship with the whole world of the communities that are behind the walls of prisons and experiencing the violence of incarceration. And there was this a professor at UC Berkeley, John Powell, who really challenged me in about 2013 or 2014 to, he created, he's the founder of this Institute for Othering and Belonging. And I got to be in some training and got dialogues with him. And his challenge was, who have you left out of your heart? And how can you expand your sphere of human concern? And I really took that in and began to ask myself, who have I left out of my heart? And how can I expand my sphere of human concern? And that it felt like, I've been doing this work. I politically, in terms of social justice, am working on dismantling mass incarceration, part of these big movements in California that was really shifting the pendulum towards rehabilitation. And I'm proud of that work, but I also felt that sense of sort of out of integrity that I don't have direct relationship with the people that are impacted. So that I could go on and on. There's lots of other pieces to the story, but that got me curious about and kind of motivated to understand and get connected into folks that are experiencing it, and finding ways that I could be part of what truly is this extraordinary transformative movement that is happening inside prisons.
Beautiful, thank you. And I'm trying to recall those two questions because they sounded so beautiful. Who have you left out of your heart? And what was the second one?
Yeah, so the first is, who have you left out of your heart? And the second is, how can you expand your sphere of human concern?
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. And Fateen, you, how about you? What's your story? How did you come to be doing this work?
Yeah, mine's is a different route, of course. I will start with an earlier story. So I originally grew up in Southern California, single parent home with my mom, and then four siblings, all sisters. And there was a lot of struggle for me as a boy coming up in that environment in Long Beach, California. It was a lot of, gang activity, drugs. Um, Really impoverished parts of Long Beach is where me and my family lived. So, uh, and I did not have my father in my life much. So I went about life trying to figure things out on my own. and through that became, susceptible to peer pressure, to a lot of, low self-esteem issues, and then just basically trying to figure out who I was. So all through those years, I made a lot of, bad decisions of who I associated with and things like that. So I started getting in trouble early in my teen years, went to juvenile halls. Um, then it escalated to going to like a juvenile prison, which was called CYA, California Youth Authority, for just a lot of mischievous acts. And ultimately, I had made a really bad decision in committing a really violent crime that hurt someone really bad. And I was sentenced to 36 years in prison for that at the age of 21. And during that time, I was serving, there was no rehabilitative programs in the prison system at the time because the focus was punishment more so than rehabilitation. So those early years, I didn't have no access to change. Even though I longed for change, I just didn't know how to get it. And so, kind of moving forward, 14 years into my sentence, I landed at San Quentin State Prison, where GRIP was offered. All I knew is that I wanted to, participate in some kind of program that's going to help me understand why, I was doing the things I was doing. Why did I have a perpetual state of anger, like at all times? And just trying to figure out how can I obtain peace while in prison. And GRIP had offered me that. I was able to meet Jacques Verduin, uh, as soon as I got there. And I was part of his meditation program originally that he had, and then he offered GRIP to us. And when I took GRIP, it just totally changed my life. Total transformation around, what it was that led me to come to prison. So I was able to source the trauma. I was able to track how I was feeling about those traumas, and learned how to reframe those traumas and allow that to let me heal from it, you know. And I was able to have a lot of support. Kim is part of it, Jock, so many other folks from the community that came into the prison to lend themselves to us at the time was super important because most of prisoners in there, I would say people incarcerated, have a sense of feeling outcasted, misfits, that we don't belong in larger society. And there's a lot of shame connected to that. So when folks like Kim and Jock and others that came into the prison from the communities, it made us feel like we was accepted by the larger community as a whole, and that our crime in and of itself doesn't, take away from our human value. So it was super transformative to me. And lo and behold, I was slated to do 31 years from that 36-year sentence. However, through commutation from former Governor Jerry Brown in California, I was awarded a commutation, and from the work that I was doing with GRIP, and got out 10 years early. So my release date was 2019 instead of 2029. And
Yeah, I
so,
met Jerry Brown, by the way. I really like the man.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And actually, his wife, Ann Brown, came to one of our classes one day. Uh, it was huge. She came. She seen what we do. I was able to perform a spoken word piece for her around the healing part, and it was really remarkable. Um, so yeah, after I got out, I immediately connected with GRIP. Started as a contractor, then part time, and then now full time facilitator. at the institution I'm at, Vacaville CMF, where I facilitate 2 of the classes, and I also do trainings for our inside folks there, and the trainings for all the grip training facilitators that are looking to be part of the work.
Thank you. Let me just say a little bit. I worked for a big chunk of my life working with alcoholics and drug addicts. And I started a wilderness program, take adults out in the wilderness to come to grips, there we go, with their past. And so I'm very familiar with that, the sense of the sense of redemption is possible. You know, that is such a big thing. When I went on your website, I hope I can not cry now. Man up, John. And I watched your video there, and there were more than tears in my eyes. Let's put it that way. I was extremely moved, and it's one of the most hopeful things I've seen, and graceful things in the sense it's full of grace, and the care of the prisoners for each other, and the honesty that these men were speaking with was deep bow, deep appreciation. And thank you so much for what you're doing. Thanks for being here.
You know, it makes me think, I wonder, Fateen, if you'd be willing to share the story of what happened on your first morning out, because I think yes, it's a story of redemption, and that ripples out to offer healing. You know, we're a healing and accountability intensive program, and then the healing ripples out to touch so many people beyond the individual student. And the morning that Fateen was released is an example of how that works.
Yeah, so I was released September 30th, 2019. And Jacques Verduin and another good friend of mine, Bob's, who also part of the program, picked me up that morning and took me to breakfast. And it was just surreal, just being out and back into the world, and the colors were brighter. The trees, the leaves looked greener, and the air smelled and felt really crisp and fresh. It was a total surreal feeling. It's hard to describe. So while when we went to the place we had breakfast, we were recording my release and everything. And we go into the restaurant, and one of the one of the workers in there was asking, "Why are there cameras in here?" And Jacques let them know that I was freshly released after doing 21 years in prison, and they were like, "Oh, wow, that's great. Can I take a picture with them?" Right? So I took a picture with the worker, and then later she asked, "What is it that we do?" And I shared with her what it was that we do, transformational program in prison, helping folks, obtain freedom before getting out. And she started sharing her story of trauma where her father was murdered by a friend, and she never talked about it. It was very recent for her at the time, maybe like 5 years in. And he was recently, he had been sentenced to the death penalty, the friend. And she never spoke to anybody about it, no therapist, no one at all. And so I apologized to her, just even though I know I wasn't the one that committed that crime against her father, their family, but I was part of a violent culture at one point. And I wanted to apologize on the behalf of the offender, you know, and that opened her up. She started crying, and she just kept telling me that I didn't do it. It's not my fault, that I don't have to apologize. But I said, no, I insist, because I can see the pain. I can still see the hurt in her heart about this. And so I just want to let her know that I see her and I feel her pain. I wanted to definitely empathize with her. And so that was my very first day out, and it was really surreal to just continue to be doing the work from inside and doing it out. And pun intended, that's one of our slogans, inside out.
It sounds like a definite calling you got on your first day. It's like,
Yes.
there it is.
Yes.
So this is, as far as I know, unique in the degree of radical transformation that group aims for and seems to produce. And so maybe you could give us a sense, people who are listening who have not had the privilege of being exposed to this, knowing this program, maybe you could give us a sense of what exactly this year-long training consists of.
Mhm. You want me to go, Kim, or you got it?
Go for it.
Okay. So GRIP, Guiding Rage into Power, is a year-long comprehensive healing and accountability program. And we focus on 4 elements throughout this year. One is cultivating mindfulness. Second is developing emotional intelligence. Third is stopping my violence doing no harm. Fourth is understanding victim and survivor impact. So in those categories, we have specific assignments that we like for the students to do. We First, let me kind of back up. Before we do that, we have to build out a really safe container for
Yeah.
these folks, because we're asking these folks to come in and to, trust us and share some of their deep, most inner secrets about themselves that they probably never shared before. And so we want to make sure that they can trust not only the outside facilitators, but the people that are in the group with them, their tribe members, their fellow grippers, that they can trust that process. And so it takes about, for a weekly session, probably takes about 8 weeks, 8 to 10 weeks for us to fully build out that safe container. For our monthly, which is 8 hours once a month, takes about 2 sessions.
And the team, you start with a group of men and they
Yeah.
work together the whole year. Is that correct?
Yes.
And
We start.
what's the average number of participants?
We have about upwards to 34 participants, if we can get that per class. And then we'll also have a team of outside facilitators, about 3 of us, and then a team of inside facilitators, about 3 of them. So they're still incarcerated, but they're helping with facilitating the program.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so throughout that year, we have them do really intense work around their traumas, right? We start off with an assignment called Unfinished Business. That's one of our earlier assignments. And unfinished business, writing an unfinished business letter, is being able to write to someone that they have either resentment for, some kind of ill feelings about, and trying to see if they can resolve that within themselves without even communicating with the person, within themselves, by writing a letter to them and like they're actually reading it to them, right? And the purpose of this is for them to see if they can finish the business where they won't be feeling held back by whatever the issue is. They can write to a person, or they can even write to themselves. They can write to their younger selves if they feel like there's something they want to address to them younger selves. So we'll start with that. We'll also do assignments around grief. We do assignments around triggers. And we do assignments around original secondary pain. And ultimately, we do assignments around their commitment offense and how that happened. Lastly, we do apology or a remorse letter for the victims that have been harmed, by us. So throughout that process, they learn not only to, heal from their own traumas, but then also learning how to make a living amends for the traumas that they caused.
And Fateen, are these letters shared with the group?
Yes,
Good.
yes, yes. These letters, the way that the program is designed, we go into what is called small groups. We started in a big group. So, and we'll go in small groups with other facilitators. There'll be a small group, about 5 or 6 folks, and they will read those letters in those small groups.
Wow.
And then we'll ask questions around how they feel about that letter, and do they feel like the business is settled? Sometimes it's not. Sometimes the business is not settled, and it's okay, right? We let them know it's okay. The important part is that you're getting it out of your system and you're being heard.
And you mentioned it took about 8 weeks for the group to really get to the place where they're feeling comfortable and they're trusting the facilitators, they're trusting each other. Is that pretty accurate? A couple of months?
Yes. It take about a couple of months to get everybody to trust it. We don't want people to start revealing stuff early, too soon, because we don't know if everybody ready for that. So
in my first few weeks as a wilderness guide with all these guys, it would take a few weeks till they figured out if I were for real or not, and they trusted each other. And it was just about building trust in the wilderness. You got to work together, it's all this thing. And then when you get to that point, that's where the real magic begins, and it becomes so incredibly powerful.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
there definitely is. There's kind of the arc of the year, the first few months, it is kind of more like the facilitators are pushing the flywheel to get it moving. And there's some, quieter resistance or, kind of testing. But then there's a certain point where the flywheel just starts to move, and we're just kind of trying to hold it, so that it doesn't go off the rails, but like that there's this momentum that happens. And I think, as Fateen described sort of some of the concrete ways that it works, I think energetically, there really is a beginning, middle, and end. It goes through a life cycle. So you start with that, with the building the container, building that sense of trust, and then you go into what happened to you. You go into the experience where we're inviting people to explore themselves as like the early innocence, the early child, and then what happened to them that set the kind of the blueprint for their coping strategies, their approach to whether it was joining a gang or addiction or other kinds of violence, whatever it is, that then kind of was coping strategies that then led to a commitment offense. And then you can go into the accountability part, because the first part is really about understanding your own history and trauma and your own the messages you got and the stories you started to tell yourself, and being able to heal from that and begin to understand and have compassion for yourself. And then you can move into being accountable, really looking at honestly, what did you do to harm others, and being accountable for that, move out of the shame and the guilt of that and into a more empowered sense of ownership. And then there's this place where where students emerge into a really deep sense of empathy for, they have space to have understanding and empathy for the survivors or the victims. And we do have at the one of the most powerful moments in the whole year is when we have surrogate survivors come in and spend a day with a tribe, with a circle, to do a healing dialogue. And it's a story sharing and really deep, powerful experience. And what we've learned is that, and this is another example, again, the direct impact is not only on the students who are going through it, but also it is and has become a really profound healing opportunity for survivors. And we have a growing network of survivors that are part of this because they haven't gotten access to these kinds of tools and practices and community anywhere else. So that's another piece I just wanted to lift up. But I also, I wanted to mention sort of, how does this work? Like, what is the magic, or what is the power of the GRIP program? There's 3 core kind of methodologies that are part of it. There's instruction, right? Kind of book learning. We have a 400-page course book called Leaving Prison Before You Get Out.
Which I just happen to have here.
There you go. There you go. Right. So
book
we
by and since his name has been mentioned a couple of times, that maybe we should just say this book is by Jacques Verduin, who is the founder of this amazing program.
Yes. So it was just published for our use by Sounds True, which we're really grateful for. And we're just beginning to use it in our courses. We used to have, copies that we just created ourselves. But so we have instruction, there's kind of the book learning, there's practice, which is, we have a whole set of tools that are like flashcards that are given to students that are really tools that you can practice. And then there's processing. And that's what you asked about earlier, that there are these assignments, people write down, do a written assignment, and then they come in and they process it with other members of the tribe. So there's the witness experience. There's both the experience that can come from just writing something yourself, but then coming and speaking it out and being witnessed by others also has this energetic, profound opportunity for healing to happen.
Beautiful. And you've both, Fateen and Kim, you've both alluded to, and John, you've emphasized the incredible power of a healing community. And I just imagine, from what I saw in the graduation and the videos you've had, but even more in your own experience, I just imagine that there has to be something incredibly emotionally impactful and powerful and healing in having a group of people who probably for the first time in these participants' lives, they know they can completely trust and they can share anything and will be accepted with a healing intention. That just sounds amazing.
Absolutely. The folks that we have in our groups, the offenses that they're in for are not light offenses. Most of them have life sentences. And as of recent, we have some folks from the death row population in our classes now because of the moratorium that Governor Gavin Newsom put out in the beginning of his term, that no one will be executed on his watch. And that gave rise to expanding rehabilitation, not only to folks with, life with the possibility of parole, but also folks with life without the possibility of parole and death row folks. And so, even though the book says leaving prison before getting out, it's not literal all the time, right? It is definitely leaving prison mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, but it's not a promise that folks are going to get out, just because they have changed their lives. They're still sentenced to a certain thing, right? And release and freedom is not available for everyone. And so we definitely share the message, at least I do in my classes, that the healing of itself is the reward, right? And that's where the freedom comes from. The freedom from being subjected to ways of thinking, being subjected to certain reactionary stimuli, and knowing how to take time, breathe, pause, be still, and have a really skillful response to triggers, stressors, things like that. and where they can offer out more empathy and compassion to other folks. Although it being inside a prison institution, the freedom of being able to smile more, be happy more, and be in a more of a happy state. So those are some of the things that we let them know are beneficial to us, and so that's really important for them to know that it's about the freedom from all the other things that hold them back.
The team, do you notice that or feedback from other prisoners who aren't in the program who see changes in the people that are going through the program? How does that work out?
So,
or Kim, not just Fateen, both.
Yeah. Well, Kim, if you want to take it, you can take it.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, I think we have our own anecdotal experiences, the two of us, but GRIP has also been studied independently by academic researchers, and in fact, we'll be launching a report in early 2025 about the ripple effects, the healing ripples beyond the direct impact on students, and one of those indirect impacts is other people on the prison yard that are not students of GRIP, but that get the benefit of the impact, because once you have GRIP graduates on a prison yard, they are peacemakers, they are different. And we've had wardens and others basically say, yeah, once there's a number of GRIP graduates on a yard, it can flip the culture of the yard so that everybody is beneficially impacted, and it can support a rehabilitative culture, a healing culture for everybody, not just the students that go through GRIP. And I think that kind of gets to your question about this happens in community, because it is this paradox that this is deep personal transformation, and there's personal responsibility that, an individual student needs to take personal responsibility for the work of their own healing. And it doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in community. There's a collective healing, a collective caring, compassionate community that gets built. And we know I think GRIP is we have proof of concept that if we can create caring and supportive communities for incarcerated people who themselves commit to doing this intensive work, then they can develop these skills of mindfulness, emotional intelligence, understanding of victim impact, and be found suitable for release sooner. So you reduce the prison population. They can be safe and contributing members of their communities that can actually be peacemakers in the world, and they're key contributors to healing for survivors. So that's true public safety. That's deeper public safety, violence prevention than anything, that statistics, recidivism rate, whatever would tell you.
Well, and you can feel on the video, from the men that aren't saying anything, just the open-hearted, profound empathy they have for their brother who's speaking, and saying really, really hard stuff. And it's so you cut it with a knife. It's so powerful, so thick. Mark, what I wanted to ask you too, what do you do as kind of a follow-up or support when people get out of prison? Because you mentioned that Jacques picked you up on the day you got out. That's awesome. But how do you guys work that?
Yeah, and can I just add in there, John, as a context for it, and you know this much better than I do, so I'll make some statements, but if I'm wrong in any way, please correct. My understanding in this state and most states is that the release is almost a setup for failure, that people are given a minimum amount of money, no support, thrown back into the mainstream with, in most cases, very little in the way of a benevolent community, and just almost, well, with the recidivism, if I can get that word out, the recidivism rates speak for themselves. As I understand it, in this country, 55% of people are rearrested within a year and 77% are rearrested in 5 years. That is incredible. I mean, if we had a failure rate like that in any other institution, we would be investigating what the hell are we doing wrong. So we're doing a lot wrong, but so that is, as I understand it, is the context of the usual release. But in that context, perhaps you could tell us how GRIP works to support people at release.
Fateen, do you want to say a little bit about just your own experience and what you know about the experience of release, and then I'll circle back to organizationally, what are we doing about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So earlier I shared, I got into a lot of trouble when I was younger, teenage years, things like that. And I was part of the recidivism. I'm also struggling too, Roger. Recidivism at that time. I kept finding myself back in detention after several months, always on probation, things like that, all the way up until the commitment of the crime that led to the lengthy sentence. I was on CYA parole, so I never had a chance to clear myself and distance myself from prison or just detention, incarceration, because a lot of things were not set up for me to succeed. For instance, I had got out of county camp one time, and this was for like a petty theft. And they had a setup for youth at the time to get summer jobs in Long Beach. And around, this was like 1993. And so my probation officer recommended me to go down there and try to get one of these jobs, right? These were fast food chains, grocery stores, things like that. So I've never applied for a job before. I was super duper nervous. Didn't nobody have no advice for me because too many people in my family had jobs like that. So nobody didn't know how to give me interview tips. They just told me to dress nice, look the part, look good, right? So I thought I did that pretty well. But once I got inside this room where they have all these different employers interviewing these youth, um, I was slated to go up to, I believe it was Taco Bell, and it was a middle-aged white guy in that cubicle, never looked up at me. He was reading my application. Now, mind you, my probation officer told me to put down what I've been arrested for and what I was on probation for. And at the time, I was on probation for petty theft and I think like a GTA. And I also had another charge that had got dropped, but I put it on there, right? And he looked at my application and then asked me why I was here, why I was there for the interview. And I told him that I was there for a job, right? That's, I'm here to work. I want to work. And that's all I knew to say. And he said, no, why are you really here? Are you here to rob the place? And it took me by surprise, and I wasn't even able to respond to that. And he told me that we don't hire people like you, and basically shooed me away. And so it was supposed to be like a marathon of interviews. I was supposed to interview like 6 different companies. But after that experience, I just left. I got up out of there. And my mom was all excited. So how did the job go? How did the interview go? I said, they just hired someone else. I didn't even tell her the real experience, right? And from that point on, it felt like I did not belong in legitimate society. Like maybe the way I look, I'm a Black young youth. I was part of the gang culture at the time. And I didn't feel like I was fully accepted by the world. And so I had had some resentment around just the marginalization. I couldn't even understand it at the time. I was 16 years old. I couldn't fully understand it, but it just let me know that my fate is sealed in having to live outside of the bounds of legitimate life. And so I just wanted to share that, right? And share that because that contributed to the mindset I had that led me to commit crimes, more crimes, serious crimes that led to all that time. And so when I got out, again, Jacques was there for me, and a lot of other folks were there for me too, formerly incarcerated folks and other folks with resources, which is something I hadn't had before. And I think that and along with my, my age and maturity level contributed to me sustaining, staying out, and not having those thoughts that I used to have of not fitting in into larger society. Like I just feel like that was that guy's problem. It was him. It's not everybody else. You get what I'm saying? So I had to learn how to do that.
Thank
Awesome.
you. Yeah, and Kim,
Did you want to add on?
give us the organizational perspective. How do you
Sure.
approach it?
Yeah. So I think it is really important that we find ways to sustain the impact, because GRIP, Guiding Rage into Power, is a 1-year intensive program, and then people graduate. And then what happens, right? So we actually, part of the GRIP Training Institute is the organization. It's the community-based nonprofit organization, and the Guiding Rage into Power is our flagship program. And we've been, over the last 5-6 years, we've really been building out the organization to be able to both scale, both sustain the impact and scale it. So for sustaining, we've been developing alumni groups within the prison. So we're in 7 prisons right now in California. As you mentioned, mostly male prisons, but we started about 2 years ago in the largest female prison in California, out at Chowchilla. And so we're in 7 prisons. We have about 15 GRIP tribes going at any given time, serving about 500 to 600 students. And we now have alumni groups that are more kind of drop-in support groups for any alumni on the yard that want to keep coming and reconnecting, practicing the tools, processing, sharing. So we've started to do that. And then that can be a kind of a continuum of care as people start to go and prepare to go to the parole board, and then prepare for release and reentry. And then on the other side, when they get out, we do offer, and we partner with other organizations to do gate pickups. If people don't have family or others to pick them up at the gate, take them to their transitional housing, home, etc. We have a monthly support virtual call for any GRIP alumni called Circle of Love, that people can come and continue to feel that connection and have that sense of community. And then we're actually right now looking to hire a community engagement manager that can really oversee all of our alumni work and build out our reentry support. So I think a part of what Fateen's story explains or exemplifies is that those percentages that you shared, Roger, nationally, California isn't quite as bad. I think it's around 50% recidivism across the board. Most of those are the lower level folks that are getting that are coming in for crimes that are nonviolent, drug related, or are petty, theft kinds of things, low level. But there are still 35,000 lifers, people who are serving life sentences for having committed serious and violent crimes just in the state of California. Overall, that recidivism rate is a lot lower. GRIP recidivism rate is even lower than any of it. It's about 1.7% right now. We have 750 graduates that are out, and so very low recidivism rate. But that's not, kind of as you can imagine, that's not really the best definition of success, right? Or of, it's like recidivism is just, well, you haven't committed another crime. We have a much higher standard for what success is, and that's much more about being a peacemaker, being able to live a healthy and safe life, contribute to your family and community. And so that's sort of what we expect our graduates to be able to do it on the yard or in their communities.
And although you say that recidivism is only one metric, and it's not perhaps the best because it doesn't acknowledge the higher ideals and purpose of GRIP, at the same time, it's extraordinary that you have a 1.7, that's less than 2% recidivism rate, as opposed to about 50% recidivism rate for the rest of the state, and even more for the country as a whole. That's less than 1/20th of the usual rate. Yeah, and it's and I mean, and I'm sure you've done this, but I can imagine that translates into umpteen dollars of money saved for the state, and probably lives saved. I mean, that single figure implies so much.
Yeah, and again, I'll say that, you know, the recidivism rates are complicated, and you know that it's tricky to try to compare any of it.
Okay.
The longer you serve in prison, the less likely you are to recidivate. So you know, it is a complicated measure, but I think the general point is that yes, GRIP graduates, it seems that they're able to get out of prison at a higher rate than others, because they can demonstrate to the parole board that they have done the work, that they are safe to be released, and that their recidivism rate is very, very low. It's less than, as you said, less than 2%. And in terms of the cost, it's about $120,000 per year per person for the state of California to incarcerate somebody. And so 750 graduates are no longer incarcerated times 120,000. The number keeps changing, so I don't have it off the top of my head, but I think it's something like $80 million a year is saving when those 750 are not incarcerated.
Beautiful.
So,
and coming back to the actual well, first off, just to acknowledge the big picture and the extraordinary impact this is having for so many people. And now to come back to the kind of raw experience, you know, this is, I mean, this is you know, there are so many elements in the program, any one of which is a really demanding thing to acknowledge, to basically acknowledge one's wrongs and to be really truthful about all the screw-ups. I mean, that alone is incredibly powerful. To listen to victims whose lives have been upended and just have dealt with enormous pain as a result of similar crimes to which one is committed. I can't imagine the impact of that. And I get so I'll throw out a general question. What would you say are some of the most difficult things that participants go through, what processes that participants go through, and what are the most impactful? They may be the same, I don't know. But, yeah.
Well, here I am, John Dupuy again, and I'm here to talk about supporting the Deep Transformation podcast. The podcast has been an amazing experience for Roger and myself and for our team, and it's been growing. We're currently in the top 2% of worldwide podcasts, which is really remarkable. We think it's very important. We think deep transformation is the only way to go, because if we don't, we're in serious trouble. And we're so grateful for the amazing presences and spirit and soul and people who've been on our podcasts. We'd also like to ask you again for your support, financial support, and thank you for all of you who have been supporting this. And up till now, it's all been out of pocket for Roger and myself. And it takes money to produce, to pay our staff, and for marketing. And so the circle keeps on growing, but the quicker that could happen, the more positive effect we could have in the world. And that's what we're here to do. And I was thinking before this, upstairs in my meditation room, I have the famous 10 Zen ox herding pictures up there. And the final one, after you guys go through all this journey, is going back into the marketplace with open hands and open heart. And so that's what we're trying: open hands, open heart, open mind, so that we can do what? We can transform effectively and deeply and listen to some of the greatest minds on our planet as to how to do that. So thank you for your support. We love you and you matter. God bless.
So I'll throw out a general question. What would you say are some of the most difficult things that participants go through, what processes that participants go through, and what are the most impactful? They may be the same, I don't know. But, yeah.
I can start with that. And first and foremost, I should mention that if you're hearing a loud snore in the background, that's my little pooch down here. It just won't leave my side. So just want to put that out there. If you think that if I'm sleeping in the background, I'm not. So I would say the most important assignment is what we call the 6 steps that leads to an act of violence, which we just revised to 4 steps. That is one of the biggest impact for the students, because it asks them to be vulnerable and accountable for their actions. So this is after they done realized the traumas that they've been through from the other assignments. They realize that they are not their crimes anymore, right? And they realize that they can transform shame into remorse. And so when we get them prepared for that, we just ask them to share their commitment offense story and fit in these boxes to see how it all played out. What happened step by step, right? When were you triggered? How did that make you feel? What was going on in your body? What was the emotions that came up? What were your thoughts telling you? And then what was the action or reaction? And so we unpack that with them, right? We don't give them answers or anything like that. It's for them to determine themselves, right? So we just guide them. And once they are able to do that, and sometimes this be the first time some folks have shared about their commitment offenses.
I also have a question. Roger, did you have something you wanted to?
Yeah, but go ahead, John.
Yeah, well, I had a career as a political activist fighting against some really hard stuff. And I was in the treatment world. The house that I'm talking from now was a treatment center for 8 years. I mean, all my beloved addicts and alcoholics were all over me, and there were no days off. But I found that this is very intense giving work. You're holding a lot, you're giving a lot. How do you take care of yourselves when you're not working? How do you renew yourself? And what kind of skills or practices have you developed? I was dying. I had to discover that for me.
You can go ahead, Kim, take that one, and I'll jump in afterwards.
Sure. Yeah. I think, self-care and processing secondary trauma are both things that are important within our organization and that we promote in all kinds of ways, structurally and, culturally. And for me personally, as a facilitator, I have been facilitating the program down at the prison in Soledad for the last many years. And I had to take a sabbatical year because it got too emotional. I felt myself kind of going dead, not really being able to tap into the empathy. And so I took a sabbatical year. I'm just starting up again on Saturday for a new cycle. And there's all kinds of things, meditation, connecting. Like Fateen and I facilitated a tribe together, and during some of the darkest parts of it, like when people are sharing their commitment offenses and you hear these just horrendous things that people have done, it's just important that we could reach out to each other and just, I can't talk to my friends at home or, my husband or whatever about like, can you believe that, but I can to Fateen, or just be, just say, hey, God, that story is just sticking in my head. I can't get it out. And what do you do with, and just be able to process it with each other. So therapy, meditation, retreats, beach, showers, baths, any hot water, whatever it takes to support yourself regaining and having keep creating those boundaries, so that the trauma that you hear, those stories can kind of come in and then move out, so that you're not holding them yourself.
Mm.
Absolutely. Everything she shared, and self-care is very important in this work, because if not, it's you can easily burn out, from the vicarious trauma, carrying that. Like she just shared, sometimes some of the stories do stick with us, where they're hard to kind of leave out of the mind. And being human, we have to acknowledge that, like, we're not perfect. We're not saying that, we're not making some judgments sometimes when we hear things, right? And it's easy to to say like, oh, okay, I do see the human, but I do acknowledge some of the things that seem horrific, right? And that includes me, right? That includes me. Like, I done some things that people probably would consider horrible, and it's me learning how to accept that is very important, and self-care is important. So for myself, I'm a big comedy buff. I like watching comedies after I hear it's like tough stories and things like that. When I get home, I put on a sitcom, or I put on a comedy special, something to get me laughing, and kind of try to laugh that up out of my body, you know. Uh, but then I also, exercise in community, sometimes debriefing with like a colleague about some of the stuff and how it's sitting on, in the body and things like that. But ultimately, it doesn't make me change my view of the person, that this is a person that have committed a bad act, but is not a bad person, because we take them. We one of our things we say is we here to help remind you of who you truly are. So we do this in a circle, and the question is, who are you truly, right? So my thing is, I take them all the way back to a baby, right? Uh, and as a baby, what do we have to offer once we come into this world? We have really nothing to offer but love, right? That's it. When the baby is born, the doctor spank him on his butt, make sure he or she can breathe, and then immediately they give the baby to the mother for instant bonding connection. And that's all a baby can do, is give love at that moment, right? And receive it from the mother, right? So we tell them that's who you are. You're a person that is capable and deserving of love, you know, that you can give love, and you deserve to receive love. And that's the reminder of who you truly are. So that's like a big part of the work.
Mm.
Yeah, when I was in the Bay Area, I was doing this career of the political activism and working with addicts, and I was getting pretty crispy because again, the stories and just giving and giving. And a song came on the radio, and it was a black rapper. They called it rap back then. They didn't even say hip hop. That's how long ago that was. And he had the song, "I got to pray just to make it today," and I was, oh God, yes. So that was kind of a breaking point for me, and I'll remember his name later, but he was a big star in the Bay Area back then, and internationally he was big. So, but I got to pray just to make it today, and that helped
I think
do
you're
that.
you're pointing to something really important, though, that I think is what also is really, it's really important for us all to keep in mind as we do this work, is that it really is a mutual journey of healing and liberation and transformation. And so
Yes.
if it becomes something where it's I'm giving and you, the student, are receiving, then we are actually in a duality that is taking us away from true transformation. So I think a lot of what the power of this work is when we can move beyond the dualities of us, them, victim, offender, teacher, student, free person, incarcerated it's like leaving prison before you get out is about freeing our minds from the kinds of habits of attention and thinking that keep us incarcerated, whether we are actually in a prison or not. And similarly, if I'm going in as somebody from the outside to free somebody else or like treat them like a student and I'm the one giving to them, it is going to deplete me, and it's actually not going to be as effective. If I'm going in to walk a path of learning and healing and accountability with people who are committed to that for themselves, then we have a mutual journey. So, and I think that's actually maybe to go back to one of the earlier questions about what are the most some of the powerful moments in the course, or kind of the places that can be most challenging. I want to lift up another part. I think Fateen spoke to the really probably the hardest and darkest part of the work, which is when people write their commitment offense stories and then analyze and share their crimes. It's a really heavy part. There's another part that I think also is incredibly powerful and challenging, is around belief systems. And so one of the phrases from Jacques in the book is that you are not in prison because of what you did. So we'll get up there in the front of, in the circle, and we'll say, you know what? You are not in prison because of what you did. And everybody's like, what? Of course I am. No, you are in prison because you believed the thoughts that justified the actions that you took. So we then go and we look at what were those thoughts that justified your actions, and what are the beliefs that you hold that allowed you to have those thoughts. And so we start to unpack and create a space to really look at the belief system of the gender-based belief system of masculinity, and where violence comes into that, and how people are raised into belief structures that justify violence. And then they can, so you make conscious what is conditioned and inherited, and then you can invite people to question it and to choose beliefs that actually are more empowering and more healthy and non-harming. So, what does it mean can you be a man that is acting in the world in a healthy and strong and safe way, and not be controlling or be believing that you deserve anything from a woman, and if they don't give it to you, then you are justified in acting against them violently, or whatever that is. So I think that's a really powerful part. And I didn't share this earlier, but one of the things that kind of got me into grip was when I was studying to be a Buddhist chaplain, and Jacques and some of the graduates of the program came and spoke at the meditation center where I was studying in Redwood City. And towards the end, one of the graduates, a guy named Terrell, offered an apology to everybody in the room, similar to what Fateen spoke about earlier. But he basically just said, for anybody who's here today who has experienced harm, I just want to apologize to you on behalf of those of us who have caused real harm. You didn't deserve it, and I'm sorry for the pain in your life. And in that moment, for me, I recognized that I had a longing to hear that kind of genuine apology that I didn't even know I had until that moment. And it set me on a path to really face some of the experiences of sexual harm that I had had as a teenager and young adult. So now when I go in to the prison, I've been working in a prison where there is a high percentage of the students are people who've committed sexual crimes. Yeah. And so it's a mutual process. It's a pretty incredible thing to be, to actually be with men who have committed serious, violent sexual harm and see their desire to learn from and heal from what they did and acknowledge it. And I'll tell just one story. Actually, it was my very first year facilitating. I was a trainee at a different prison out in Tracy at Dual Vocational Institution. And we did this, we did a little activity at the time where I sat in the middle on a chair in the middle of the circle with a chair across from me, and any man in the circle could come and sit in that. And I offered myself as kind of the generic female and could be whoever they wanted to apologize to. And they would, men would come and sit in that and tell me what they had done as if I was that person, their mother, their girlfriend, their daughter, their whatever, and name it and say it, and then apologize. And I have to say, for me, that was one of the most transformative experiences for me, because I came away feeling so incredible, so much love, so much compassion, so much sense of like their humanity, and so proud of them. And it is in that I have developed a greater sense of hope and safety myself, and compassion. And, I joke, I started this work when my daughter was 5, because I started going to prison when my daughter was 5, because I started to be afraid of the world. What was she going to experience? And I didn't want her to experience what I had experienced. And so for some weird reason, I thought going into prison was going to help, And it has, because I now believe that it really is possible for people, even you think about in society, who are the pariahs? Who are the people that people will say, oh, well, not them. We can let the nonviolent offenders out. We can let the drug folks out, or we could even let the violent offenders, but not the sex offenders out, or like not the child molesters out, or like they're still the pariahs that are not redeemable. And what my challenge, I think, and I feel like I really speak from a deep understanding, is that yes, it is. It's everybody. Can we open our hearts to everybody, regardless of what they did, even including if they harmed a child, if they raped multiple women, they are human beings who can become our, they are members of we are all in this. They are part of us and we are part of them.
Well, that's so powerful. And as with a number of times during our dialogues, I just am feeling teary just hearing that. It's so powerful. And I want to just acknowledge some of the you've told us some incredible stories that contain jewels of healing wisdom, both of you. I just want to explicitly name a couple of the ones you just pointed to, Kim. One is that there's a principle in therapy, that in really deep therapy, therapy isn't working unless both people are transformed. Both quotes the therapist and quotes the client. And you just gave a beautiful example of that, and you've both given the example that both of you have been transformed by your work there. The other one, another principle is that if you know, it seems like maybe there's an exceptions, but it sure seems like if you get to know anyone deeply enough, you really care and love them. There's an empathy and understanding that develops, and it's like it just evokes a care for people who might have been the extreme other. And the third one is the general principle that it seems like almost anyone's redeemable in some way. It's such a more hopeful and compassionate understanding than our one that there's the certain people aren't, and they just deserve to be thrown away from society, basically as pariahs, I think is the word you both used. So anyway, I just wanted to acknowledge those and the power of power of each of those three principles, and as so emotionally powerfully demonstrated in the stories both of you have conveyed.
Yeah. And that's what I think, we had a longtime donor supporter of GRIP who at one point said, I give to GRIP because it is my prayer for humanity.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a way that when you maybe start to come in and you think, oh, this is amazing, this is rehabilitation for incarcerated people, and I'm liberal, progressive, whatever, I think that's important, or oh, I believe in public safety, so I want to make sure that that it's rehabilitation, inside the prisons and save money and all the rest. But really what actually happens is when you can recognize that there's that it's the wisdom that's coming out for the rest of us from inside prisons. Yeah. That, sort of in Buddhist terms, like the Dharma going in, but actually it's the Dharma coming out. It's the wisdom and the Dharma of transformed people who then come back and walk among the rest of us who frankly have not done or been able to do the same kind of deep, powerful work. And that's, I don't know whether maybe that's something, Fateen, you can speak to, but I hear from a lot of GRIP graduates who've gotten released that they struggle a little bit with how little emotional intelligence and trauma healing work the rest of us have done, and they're back in families and workplaces and communities where they're having to deal with a society that is a lot less capable emotionally and in terms of those inner capacities for responsibility for their reactions, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely, Kim. So yeah, when folks, like for myself, when I got out, I'm a changed individual, in my transformation. And, I learned later that everybody is not able to accept that, especially folks that knew you for a long time, right? Knew how you were prior to incarceration and things like that. And then when you show up in this healing state, very graceful, very just humble, is surprising to some folks, right? And because they're not as used to you being that way, they want to see if they can still bring the old person out of you sometimes through antagonism, through just different things, right? So you have to learn, how to put up healthy boundaries, right? And that's something that we don't talk about much in the group, but once folks get out, like in the circle of love, there's something that we talk about is making sure you take care of yourself first before you can take care of others, and have healthy boundaries when it's not fitting with who you are today, not allowing yourself to revert back to the old way and the old self, So it is a major challenge to engage and encounter folks that can't accept fully your transformation. And what I would also say, what's unique about GRIP inside these settings is the level of diversity of our students. Every race, every religion, every you know anyone from any community, including the LGBTQ community, is all welcome in our tribes. So we have a lot of people in this tribe that have different experiences, have different belief systems that they developed over the years. And what folks meet at for as a mutual understanding is the emotions that come up from these different experiences. Everybody understand anger. Everybody understand hurt, grief, embarrassment, low self-esteem, things like that, peer pressure. So that's where folks meet at when they start telling those stories. And how they relate to each other. So that's how we learn from each other, from all these different backgrounds and things like that. And so I really like that because most folks culturally kind of stick to their culture, kind of stick to who they know and things that are more familiar. But in our program, you're going to learn from all kind of different people from all around the world, because we have folks that were immigrants, they are in our tribes and things like that. So we learn about their cultures, their belief systems, and how they deal with anger and violence. So it was very, very powerful to see the dynamics of the cultural differences, but the similarities of the feelings.
I have a question. Have you found whether, while they're still in the prison when they left, have people, your graduates and your students, have they, in some sense, discovered spirituality or religion and started going to church or to temples? Or I noticed there was a Native American man in the video, and I was thinking, he feels like he's on the red path. I mean, did he, go back and discover his roots and how he got off track? It seems like that would be happen quite often, and another type of support outside of the work that you guys do.
I would say that the work we do is interfaith, right? So we welcome all faiths, all walks of life, from Christians, Buddhists, folks practicing Buddhism, practicing Islam, to atheists. Anybody can be in our group. And we don't focus so much on spirituality, but it is part of the work because we want to not only transform self mentally, emotionally, but we want folks to kind of transform spiritually, to have some kind of spiritual guidance that's kind of, helping them morally and having some really good human values connected. And so we just ask them to cater to those things that offer good human value.
And you do include meditation in your program as a sounds like a major component. Of course, Jacques Verduin, the founder, is at this moment in Spirit Rock Meditation Center doing a retreat. So I know that's been very important to him and a major part of the program. I just imagine that would be very challenging to learn to meditate in prison, carrying all this pain and trauma and shame and so forth. I mean, well, that does not sound easy.
So yeah, meditation, because it was new to me when I first started, and I felt like in the beginning, like I was always hyperventilating. Like it's like I didn't know how to breathe right, and then when I did breathe, I was focusing just too much on what's going on in my mind, all these different thoughts. So it took a while for me to learn it's not about trying to get full stillness. It's not about emptying the mind and trying to get to a place of enlightenment, right? With this work, it's about how are you breathing scientifically? Are you getting enough oxygen in the brain and in the body in order to self-regulate, in order to reduce the level of stress and triggers that are occurring? So the way we offer it now is more of a scientific way that we know for sure deep breathing brings in more oxygen, and with more oxygen to the brain, you are able to think clearer. Once you are able to be aware and present in the moment and understand what's going on with your body, what's going on with your mind, how your emotions are coming out, and to make a decision from that point, right? So we don't really focus on any kind of like Eastern way of meditation. They're just general groundings and meditations that will help them with being present.
Yeah, I think that the main teaching, or the main tool that we ask, people, we do meditate in the class and offer that, but it really is about, can you develop and understand the difference between a reaction and a response, so that there's that pause between the split-second reaction that you may habitually have in your life, to then have that, be able to extend that to notice what's happened, what's triggered you, what the circumstance is, to then be able to have a skillful response. And that is such a fundamental, I mean, that's really the essential root of mindfulness and meditation, but it's an essential tool or practice to be able to stop violence.
Yeah. And a way of a way of stopping violence and bringing greater peace, which I imagine has been something very rare in these people's lives. And I want to just acknowledge something you both alluded to, but you named, Kim, and saying that there's a wisdom that is born in these experiences and these groups, and that it can come out into the world. And I want to acknowledge that there are several insights that have come from participants, prisoners, that I use in doing the psychotherapy training at the university. For example, there's a exquisite story of the two prisoners coming up with the insights that, hurt people, heal people. That says so much. And so, something I've used in psychotherapy training myself. And the another line I've used, that you get to learn. No, I'm not sure I can pull it back up. But maybe one of you can say it along the lines of that. You're able to make a living by what you earn, but you make a life by what you give. Something along those lines. Anyway, very touching and very beautiful, and really deep life wisdom that has come out of these people. Yeah.
Well, is there any way to contact you if people have heard this and want to give, and maybe the website address, because you got to see the video too, and also support this. If you see that video, just open your heart, break your heart. So
yeah, absolutely. We, as with everything, we see this as a mutual journey of connection and community. So if there are people who are listening, would like to be part of the GRIP community and family, there's various ways to connect in. And our website is, if you just Google GRIP Training Institute, I think the actual URL is grip-traininginstitute.org. But there's resources there. There's the trailer video. There's some more information, and there's, of course, a donate button. We're getting into the end of the year season, so would welcome any.
Yeah, and we can put this information up on the screen so people can and see and reach out.
Great, thank you.
And maybe as we're coming towards the end here, you could just say something about what's the vision for the future. It started as one program in San Quentin, as I understand it's now in multiple prisons, including women's prisons. What's the vision for the future?
Yeah, thanks. So this was something that we have really been working on as an organization to identify how do we go forward. We have this proof of concept flagship program, Guiding Rage into Power, but there's so much other potential. So we developed a scaling strategy about a year ago that we've been beginning to pilot. And really it's based on that, as I said, there's 35,000 lifers just in California. And not only is that a huge number of people and a huge cost to our society, but also we've begun to more deeply understand that when someone goes to prison, they, in many cases, get worse. And they get pulled into prison gang politics. They end up committing more violence. They experience more trauma themselves. And a typical lifer is going to spend 10 to 15 years up at a max security prison, or, screwing around basically in this, in the prison politics before they hit a point where they make a commitment to turn their lives around and work their way down to a rehabilitative kind of prison where GRIP is. So with that in mind, we began to develop a way that we're calling re-entry from day one, where we want to short circuit that, where we could go to the reception center where there's about 100 lifers entering the system every year. So we want to short circuit that 10 to 15 years, start by going to a reception center and interviewing and connecting with those incoming lifers and giving them the opportunity from day one to come to a GRIP hub, a deep culture, rehabilitative culture prison, and get on the path from the very beginning. So we've started a partnership with the Department of Corrections in the state of California to be able to go to the reception centers and work with the prison system so that they don't go up to a max level prison, but they are able to come into a GRIP hub, and then we have wraparound support and services for them. So that's one of the main things that we believe in terms of kind of impact. We're deepening our work in those 7 prisons, creating that full journey of the full hub kind of journey from the very beginning, sort of intro program. We have something called a Breath of Freedom that's kind of an early self-discovery program that inside GRIP graduates can be the mentors and facilitators of. Then they can do the GRIP program, then they're in the alumni groups, and then they're getting support and reentry. So it's this entire continuum of support and care. And we believe that will enable people to be found suitable more quickly, to be able to get out of prison at the first chance they get. So fewer years of incarceration for us as a society. They'll be safe, contributing members of their families and communities, and they will contribute to the healing of survivors as well and prevent re-victimization.
Yeah, I just want to point out you guys must be really good, because it's not easy to get into these government-run prisons. There's a lot of bureaucracy and there's a lot of keep your noses out. This is our thing. So they must really love you guys and respect what you're doing to support you in that way. And I imagine the prison guards too appreciate, prisoners becoming less violent and healing, and the fact that they're letting you do that just speaks a lot for the integrity and the power of what you're doing. It's very impressive.
Well, thank you both so much, and this is incredible work. I continue to be deeply moved by everything I hear about GRIP and the work you're doing and the lives you're saving and transforming. And again, I want to acknowledge the founder, Jacques Verduin, who I've come to deeply respect, and to see the vision he had that you're manifesting and the lives you're changing as a result of that. So deep bow of gratitude to you both, and may your work continue to flourish.
It's very noble
Thank
stuff.
you.
Very noble stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.